My journey to English fluency. Hello, my name is Sophia, and I'm from Argentina. A few years ago, I couldn't speak English very well. I could read some words and write simple sentences, but when I tried to speak, I couldn't. My words didn't come out. I felt shy, slow, and sometimes very stupid. I wanted to speak English fluently, but I didn't know how. Then something happened. One day, I watched a video in English. It wasn't a lesson. It was just a girl talking about her life in New York. I didn't understand every word, but I could follow her story. Her voice was warm. Her words were natural. And I wanted to speak like her. From that day, I started my own English journey. I didn't use grammar books. I didn't memorize long lists of words. Instead, I listened. I listened a lot. I listened every day. And little by little, my English started to grow. Now, I can speak easily. I still make mistakes, but I feel confident. I don't need to translate in my head anymore. I just speak. In this story, I want to share what I learned. I want to tell you how I became fluent in English without going to an English-speaking country. If I can do it, you can too. The first secret: automatic English. If you want to speak English fluently, you need to speak it automatically. What does that mean? It means speaking without thinking about grammar. It means speaking without stress. It means you just open your mouth and the words come out, like when you speak your native language. When you speak your first language, do you think about verb tenses? Do you stop to ask yourself, should I use the past perfect? Of course not. You just talk. Why? Because your brain already knows the rules. It knows them so well that you don't need to think about them. That's called unconscious knowledge. Let me explain that again. Fluent English comes from unconscious knowledge. This means you have the language inside your brain already. It's deep. It's automatic. You don't need to study to get this knowledge. You need to hear and use the language. Over time, your brain will build this automatic system. This is why studying grammar doesn't help with speaking. When you study grammar, you're learning conscious knowledge. That's knowledge you can use on paper, but not in a fast conversation. Imagine someone asks you a question in English. You want to answer quickly. But your brain says, wait. What's the rule? Should I use present simple or present perfect? And while you're thinking, the other person is waiting, and you feel embarrassed. This is what happened to me for years. I studied hard. I knew the rules. But when it was time to speak, I froze. I couldn't use what I had learned. So what really works? The answer is simple: natural input and smart practice. This means listening to real English every day. Using English in simple ways. Repeating useful phrases. Copying native speakers. Learning the rhythm and sound of English. These are the things that helped me speak. And you don't need to live in London or New York to do them. You can do everything from your home. Let me tell you something important: you learn to speak by listening. Listening is the key. The more you listen, the more your brain understands how English works. The more you listen, the more you hear the sounds, the grammar, the word order, the stress, and the intonation. All of this goes into your brain. And slowly, it becomes automatic. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. That's okay. You just need to understand the main idea. Even if you don't catch every word, your brain is still learning. Listening with purpose. Here's what I did. I chose videos and podcasts that I enjoyed. I didn't watch grammar lessons. I watched travel vlogs, interviews, and short documentaries. I listened to stories. I listened to people talking about their lives. I watched YouTube videos with English subtitles, not subtitles in my own language. Why? Because this way, I could hear and read English at the same time. It helped me connect the sounds to the words. I could feel the rhythm of the language. And when I saw a new word, I paused the video and searched for it. I didn't write the word. I just understood it and moved on. And guess what? After hearing the same word again in another video, I started to remember it. You don't need to study vocabulary lists. You just need to see and hear the words many times in real situations. That's how babies learn. That's how we all learn. At first, I didn't speak much English. I listened and understood, but when I tried to speak, my sentences were slow and simple. I didn't know if they were correct. I wanted to say more, but I didn't have the words. I thought maybe I needed a teacher or a partner to practice with. But I didn't have one. I was alone. So I decided to speak with the only person I had, myself. In the beginning, it felt strange. I stood in front of a mirror and talked about my day. I said simple things like I'm cooking rice today or I feel happy because it's sunny. I described what I was doing. Now I'm cleaning the kitchen. I don't like cleaning, but I have to do it. I said these things out loud. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I just wanted to use English. After a few days, I noticed something. I started to feel more comfortable speaking. My words came a little faster. I didn't feel so shy anymore. My brain didn't freeze when I wanted to talk. I didn't care if I made mistakes. I just spoke. And that small change was very important. Because now I was using the language, not just studying it. But there was one problem. I realized I was always using the same words. My English wasn't growing. I needed new vocabulary. I needed new sentences. Talking to myself was good, but not enough. So I changed my method. I started to speak after I listened. I watched a short video and then tried to talk about it. I told the story again in my own words. At first, I could only remember small parts. But I didn't stop. I said what I could. I tried to explain what I had understood. Sometimes I paused the video and repeated a sentence from the speaker. I listened carefully and copied their voice, just like a child copies a parent. I tried to sound the same. I didn't worry about the grammar. I focused on the sound. I copied their rhythm, their intonation, and even their emotions. I didn't know it then, but this was a technique called shadowing. It helped me more than anything else. The more I copied, the more natural my speaking became. And I started to sound more like a real English speaker. Still, I had good days and bad days. Some days I was full of energy. I listened a lot. I spoke a lot. I felt proud. But some days I felt tired. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to speak. I felt like I would never become fluent. On those days, I gave myself permission to rest. I watched something funny in English. I listened to music. I reminded myself that learning a language is a long journey. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to continue. Over time, I found something interesting. The more I listened, the more I understood. And the more I understood, the more I could speak. It became easier to form sentences. I didn't need to translate in my head anymore. My brain started to think in English. It didn't happen all at once, but it happened slowly, like the sun rising in the morning. One evening, I was walking in the park and I realized something. I had been thinking in English for the past 20 minutes. I was thinking about my plans for tomorrow, about what I needed to buy, and about the movie I wanted to watch, all in English. I smiled to myself. This was something new. Something exciting. My brain was changing. I was becoming a speaker of English. But I wanted more. I wanted to speak to real people. I looked online and found a language exchange app. I spoke to a girl from Canada. I was nervous at first, but she was kind. We talked about simple things. She told me about the snow in her city. I told her about the summer in mine. I made mistakes, of course, but she understood me. That gave me a lot of confidence. After that, I started to talk to more people. Not every day, just once or twice a week. Some people were learners like me. Others were native speakers. I didn't understand everything they said, but I always asked questions. I always tried to keep the conversation going. With each talk, my English grew stronger. But the biggest change didn't happen when I spoke. It happened when I listened. Every time I listened to someone, I noticed how they used words. I noticed small things like how they said I've been there or I might go tomorrow. These small pieces of language entered my mind and stayed there. I didn't try to memorize them. I didn't write them down. I just heard them many times. And then one day, I used them too, without thinking. That was the moment I understood something important. Fluency doesn't come from remembering rules. It comes from feeling the language. And you can only feel the language if you live with it. Not in a country. In your life. As my English became more natural, I started to enjoy the learning process more. It didn't feel like study anymore. It felt like living in a new world, a world where people spoke English, laughed in English, shared ideas in English. Every day, I listened to podcasts, watched videos, and spoke out loud to myself. I didn't count the hours. I just followed my curiosity. I noticed something interesting. When I listened to people speaking English, I didn't only hear words. I heard patterns. I started to notice how people answered questions, how they began and ended conversations, how they used small words like well, you know, actually, and I mean. These words were not in textbooks, but they were everywhere in real life. They made the language sound more natural, more real. I started to use these words too, and I felt like my speaking became smoother. Sometimes, I listened to the same podcast episode 2 or 3 times. The first time, I listened just to enjoy it. The second time, I tried to understand every sentence. And the third time, I repeated some parts out loud. I didn't do this every day, but when I did, I could feel my progress. I could hear myself becoming more fluent. One day, something special happened. I went to a coffee shop in my city. A tourist couple was sitting near me. They were speaking English. The man asked the woman, "What's that dessert called again?" She didn't know. I smiled and said, "It's called alfajor." They looked at me and smiled back. We started talking. I told them I was learning English. They were surprised. "You speak really well," the woman said. That small moment made me feel very proud. I realized I could use my English in real life, even in my own city. After that day, I tried to use English more often with real people. I helped tourists find their way. I asked questions in English at the museum. I talked to a British man on a bus. These conversations were short, but they were important. They gave me real-life experience. I made mistakes, of course, but the important thing was that I kept trying. And each time I tried, I got better. I also started to think more in English. It didn't happen suddenly. It was a slow change. But one day I noticed that when I was alone, I wasn't thinking in Spanish anymore. My thoughts were in English. Simple thoughts, like I need to buy eggs, or what time is it? But still, it was English. That felt amazing. It felt like I was really becoming part of the language. Thinking in English helped my speaking so much. When I thought in English, I didn't have to translate anymore. I didn't stop in the middle of a sentence to find the right word. I just said what I was thinking. My sentences were not perfect, but they were real. They came naturally. Some people think that you have to speak perfectly to be fluent. But that's not true. You just need to speak clearly and confidently. Fluency is not about using big words or complex grammar. It's about being able to share your thoughts and feelings without stress. That's the goal. That's what I was working toward. As I continued listening and speaking every day, I noticed another change. I started to dream in English. It didn't happen often, but sometimes I had dreams where people spoke English. I didn't plan it. I didn't expect it. But it happened. And I knew that my brain was really learning the language deeply. It was learning the natural way. There were still challenges, of course. Sometimes I felt stuck. I didn't feel like I was improving. I said the same sentences again and again. I forgot words I had learned. I misunderstood what people said. But I didn't give up. I told myself, this is normal. This is part of learning. And then I kept going. I also avoided grammar videos. Not because grammar is bad, but because it made me think too much when I tried to speak. I noticed that when I focused on grammar rules, I became slow. I paused. I doubted myself. But when I focused on understanding and communication, I became fast. I trusted my ears and my memory. I followed the sound of the sentence. And that helped me speak with more flow. Many of my friends asked me, "How did you learn to speak so well?" I told them the truth. I said, I listened a lot. I copied native speakers. I talked to myself. I didn't study grammar much. I just used the language every day. Some of them didn't believe me. They thought I had a teacher or a special program. But I didn't. I just had time, interest, and a little bit of courage. Courage was important. Because speaking a new language can be scary. You worry about mistakes. You worry about sounding strange. You worry that people will laugh. But most people don't laugh. Most people are kind. And if you keep speaking, your fear becomes smaller. One day, you speak without fear. You just enjoy the conversation. And that's when English becomes not just a subject, but a part of your life. After a year of listening and speaking every day, I could feel that English had become a natural part of me. I didn't need to think about it anymore. I didn't need to prepare sentences in my head. I could just speak. I could ask questions, tell stories, give opinions. My voice was not perfect, but it was confident. People could understand me. That was enough. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to keep getting better. So I tried something new. I began to record myself. Every morning, after breakfast, I picked a topic and talked about it in English for 5 minutes. I talked about my plans for the day, or about something I saw in the news, or a memory from childhood. I didn't prepare. I just spoke. Then I listened to the recording. At first, it was hard. I didn't like my voice. I heard mistakes. I heard things I wanted to change. But I kept going. After a few weeks, I listened to an old recording and compared it with a new one. I was surprised. My speaking had improved. My sentences were longer. My ideas were clearer. I sounded more relaxed. I felt proud. This small habit helped me grow a lot. It showed me my progress. It gave me a reason to keep going. During this time, I also started reading more in English. Not difficult books. Just short stories and articles that interested me. Sometimes I read with audio, so I could hear the correct pronunciation. Sometimes I read out loud to practice speaking. I didn't try to remember every new word. If a word was important, I saw it again and again, and I remembered it naturally. I didn't use flashcards. I didn't make long vocabulary lists. I let my brain do the work in its own way. One day, I watched a movie with no subtitles. I didn't plan it. I just started watching, and after 10 minutes, I realized I understood almost everything. I wasn't translating. I wasn't guessing. I was just watching and understanding. That moment felt like magic. It was like my brain had finally opened the English door completely. After that, I stopped worrying about mistakes. I didn't care if I said he go instead of he goes. I didn't care if I used the wrong tense. I knew that mistakes were part of the journey. I knew that babies make mistakes when they learn to speak, and nobody stops them. They learn by doing, by trying, by listening. So I decided to be like a baby. Brave, curious, and not afraid of being wrong. One of the most powerful things I did was this: I made English part of my identity. It wasn't just a school subject anymore. It wasn't something I had to do. It was something I wanted. It became part of my life. I changed the language on my phone to English. I watched all my shows in English. I followed English-speaking creators online. I even started to dream about traveling to English-speaking countries, not as a tourist, but as someone who could really talk to people, share stories, and make friends. I had one more dream. I wanted to help other learners like me. So I created a small blog. I wrote simple posts about my English journey, about the methods that helped me, and about the feelings I had along the way. At first, no one read it. But slowly, a few people found it. Some sent me messages. They said, "Your story gives me hope." And I was so happy. Because I knew exactly how they felt. I had been there. And I wanted to tell them, you don't need to be special. You just need to be consistent. You just need to keep going. Now, when I meet someone who wants to speak English, I always say the same thing. I say, don't study English. Use it. Play with it. Live with it. Fall in love with it. And if they ask me for a secret, I say this: the secret is not in your brain. It's in your ears, your mouth, and your heart. Listen a lot. Speak a lot. And enjoy the journey. That's my story. I started with nothing. No teacher. No money. No travel. Just a desire to speak. And now, I can say what I want, how I want. I still learn every day. I still grow. But now, English is not a mountain I have to climb. It is a friend that walks beside me. Always there. Always ready. And if I can do it, so can you. Thank you for listening to this story. If you liked it, write about it in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories.